I'm doing just fine. And of course, at Ohio State, especially in recent years under Ryan Day, we're talking about offense. We're talking about replacing a lot of key components to a offense that could be ranked number one in the country, regardless of what the exact metrics in terms of best offense. But they look prepared as long as they can get the one trigger man in place to do damage again this season. And of course, that's the huge question. Kyle McCord, Devin Brown. Do you think McCord has an obvious advantage, or it's just going to be kind of, hey, the battle's wide open, here we go?
I wouldn't say it's an obvious advantage. I would say there's definitely something to the experience factor that McCord has. Look, he's started a game for Ohio State. He's played in, I think, 12. Now, a lot of those have come in garbage time. He hasn't thrown many passes in his college career throughout those first 2 years. So he certainly has more experience than Devin Brown does, who has only played in, I want to say, 3 or 4 games, but has not thrown a college pass. McCord, I was pulling it up here. McCord has attempted 58. He's completed 70.7% of those. And obviously, the vast majority of those came in that start 2 years ago against Toledo when CJ Stroud was out. So my read on the situation is that, and this is what the coaches told us when we spoke with them in early February, this is a blank slate for both guys. Now, you can't completely negate what you've seen both in the games and what the coaching staff has seen in practice, but that these guys are going to get opportunities. They're going to be able to, share reps and do all that throughout this competition. Obviously, one guy will take the first rep of spring practice, and that will probably be Kyle McCord, but I don't think that this is one of those quarterback competitions, and I've said this a lot recently, like Justin Fields and Chris Chuganoff or CJ Stroud and Jack Miller a couple of years ago, that when there was a clear front runner that we all thought was going to win the job. The Justin Fields situation was almost laughable with how Ohio State played it, because they brought him in from Georgia. He was the number 2 quarterback in the country in his recruiting class. But this is 2 really talented guys that are going to battle for it, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. Ryan Day said he'd like to have a guy at least pulling ahead at the end of the spring. That may end up being the case. I see very few scenarios where Ohio State makes that public, though. I don't know why you would, if you're Ohio State, announce a starter after spring practice and then just open the door to potentially one guy leaving. But it is different than what we've heard from Ryan Day in the past. Usually he's been very, we'll see how it plays out, and it's kind of dragged out, and that's what I expected. But he was clear that it would be good if the one of those guys stepped up and kind of seized it at the end of spring practice, which doesn't necessarily mean that guy's going to be the starter week 1. There's obviously fall camp still to go through, but an interesting kind of change in philosophy from Ryan Day.
As you mentioned, Pat, we've got a pretty good read, at least on Kyle McCord's, not necessarily his seed, what he's going to deliver, but the style of play that he brings to the table. Devin Brown, is there another component to his game? Is there a contrast between these two in regards to what they bring to the table?
Yes. The prevailing thought, is that Kyle McCord, pocket passer type, who can move around behind the line of scrimmage, but isn't going to give you a ton with his legs in terms of rushing yards, whereas Devin Brown may not be as polished of a passer right now, but is a good passer and can certainly cause some damage with his legs. Now, Corey Dennis, Ohio State's quarterback coach, really kind of pushed back against that thought that these guys are that different. He made it seem, and again, we haven't seen a ton of Devin Brown, so it's hard to judge what he's doing in college. We can say what he did in high school and what he's done in the spring game last year and whatnot, but Corey Dennis said these guys are closer than I think a lot of people think in terms of their skill sets. So while I do think that Devin Brown is definitely more of the dual threat mobile quarterback, they at least are painting the picture, they being Ohio State, that this isn't being looked at as like one guy does this, and we'll pick a direction based on that. I think if it came down to everything being equal and Ohio State decided, look, we didn't have really a mobile quarterback the last 2 years. We saw what CJ Stroud did when he ran against Georgia. We've seen what quarterbacks country can do when they run. If Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are really neck and neck and they want a more mobile quarterback, maybe go with Devin Brown. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be a deciding factor unless, like I said, it is really these two are just, there's nothing to decide to decide between the two of them other than one's more mobile than the other. But I assume that there will be other factors that emerge throughout this competition.